Hello and welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. Hi, Laurel. How are you today?
I'm really well today. How are you?
I'm doing well. And listeners, how are you out there today? I hope everybody is doing well today. Our podcasts come out on a Monday. So if you're listening to us on a Monday, happy Monday. And if you're listening to us on any other day, I hope your day goes well today. Today we have a topic that I know I always say it's big and I always say it's important and we got so much to talk about, but it's so true because every topic that we have is so important in this beautiful work and beautiful life work that we're doing together. So, our topic today is forgiveness. Don't shut it off. If you're out there and you're thinking, I don't want to hear about that, or oh no, not that again, or oh, do I have to do that? Stay with us because I think we'll be gentle with you. And we have, our own stories to share in this, and we have some great ideas around how to do forgiveness work that I think are really important because sometimes it's hard to figure out where to start, isn't it, Laurel? That's probably one of the biggest troublesome spots with forgiveness work is where do we begin?
It is. It's a big one. And I think, for me, one of the things that often comes to mind is with forgiveness is things, forgiveness stirs up emotion of that is raw,
Yeah,
just raw. It's often, it does not dull whatever
yeah,
that emotion is.
yeah.
So I think that's why it's a scary topic for a lot of people.
I think so too. And I think that because it does bring up all that emotion, we get confused oftentimes. We don't think clearly. The emotion takes over. And so we do get in a place where we really don't know how to proceed. And so it's really helpful to have some steps around that. And we'll get to that for
Mhm.
sure. We can talk about that. For now, let's just talk a little bit about what forgiveness is and why we do it. Because I think that that's, to me, one of the most, probably the biggest motivator. If you can get your head on right about what it really is and why it's important to do, sometimes it's more, you can more readily take that first step or begin the process in something that's really hard to do or uncomfortable to
Yeah,
do. Yeah.
yeah. Can't wait to talk more about that.
Yeah, yeah. So when I think about, what forgiveness is, for me, it's about letting go of feeling like somebody owes me something and needs to repay something or is indebted to me in some way, even if it's emotionally. It's when I'm speaking in this way, it's rarely about money. It's really about transgressions with the ways I felt violated by somebody, by something they said or something they did. And for me, forgiveness is getting to the place where I don't feel that there's some debt to be repaid or some place that needs to be returned. And my heart is softened enough that I'm not carrying anger and maybe hate or misery or bad feelings about the other person. Instead, it's become mostly neutralized. And I feel like that's probably been my experience of having experienced forgiveness. That's how I would describe it for me. How about you, Laurel? When you think about forgiveness?
Yeah. For me, forgiveness often ties to, I hadn't really thought about it as, a debt to be repaid, but it is blame. It is um, continuing to be the victim of something that happened to me, um, and having to get past that, and I think one of the challenges for me has been if I practice forgiveness and if I let go of something, you know, does that mean I'm accepting it? And so I think that's the fine line for me.
Yeah,
Forgiveness does not mean acceptance,
right.
right? And so it's a little bit messy sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, but that it comes to blame or being, being wronged in some way by some other person.
Yeah,
Um, and that is a hard thing to kind of to work through when you're worried about not accepting someone's behavior or having, you know, strengthening your own boundaries, right? What does the act of forgiveness do as you're working on that other that
Yeah.
other inner work that is so important.
Yes, yes.
Um, and if
Yeah.
I can just add, I think that, you know, I mean, we all have things in life that are forgivable, things that happen to us or things that we do that we should look to for forgiveness from someone else.
Mm,
Um, but I do want to say that, you know, myself, I've had things happen, but I always think that there are far worse wrongs, that may have happened to other people. And so I want to say forgiveness is such a personal thing.
yes.
And for our listeners, um, practicing forgiveness or even considering forgiveness, it's such a personal choice.
It is.
And it's one that, even if there's something that has happened that you can't forgive, um, just know how to work through those decisions and those choices and with other people so that you're not dealing with forgiveness alone.
Yeah, beautifully said. I do think that that's really important because when we stay in that loop of forgiveness, it's kind of runs, energetically in our mind and then in our heart, the anger just keeps circling and cycling around and the hurt. And so that's what really, to me, causes us a lot of dis-ease or angst in our own personal lives. And so when we come back to, where I was at the beginning was, why do we do forgiveness? First and foremost, it's for ourselves to
Mhm,
experience a level of peace
mhm.
and um, relaxation and um, presence in the body that we otherwise can't experience because of this loop of emotion that's running through there, or the story or whatever it is, right? That really won't let go and that disrupts our whole beingness.
Yes, and I think that's really important to know that it is the emotion that we carry in our body affects us
Yeah.
so deeply, so much more than we ever know. Not just emotionally, but physically and spiritually. So I think that's really important to be able to work through some things and find a level of forgiveness that you're comfortable with just to free your body from the
Yeah.
disease that could come from that.
Yeah, I think so. That's one of the motivations, which I think is really important. You're doing it for you. You're not doing it for the other person. You do it first and foremost for your own health and well-being, right? And then secondly is the idea of, when we stay angry with somebody and we don't forgive, we actually keep an energetic connection with them. It's like we're keeping that thread of us entangled with one another's lives. And really, ultimately, most of the time, what we want is we don't want to be connected. We want to be disconnected. And so that's boundary work. And we come back and talk about that a little bit as we're talking more about forgiveness. But we do it so that we can let go and bring closure and be done. And that's part of how the peace comes. And we aren't constantly connecting energetically with something that has harmed us. It's like we wound ourselves over and over and over again with the act of staying connected almost.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about that often as um, freeing myself from being under the power or control of a circumstance or another person, right?
Yeah.
Taking my power back by letting go of whatever that wrong was that
Yes.
I was inflicted upon me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, which is such an act of empowerment, and one of the beautiful motivators, if you want a motivator, is when we stay connected and we stay in that victim place where we feel hurt, right? The only power there is kind of this righteous indignation or whatever, but it's also an uncomfortable one. It's one that's not really a positive energy flowing through us, and so to be empowered enough to say I want to free myself of that, that is more of that positive energy that we really want to feel ultimately in our lives. So yeah, this idea of what could motivate you to
Mm.
begin to want to do the difficult forgiveness work. These are some of the beautiful ways that you can start to think about.
Yeah,
Um,
and it just, it just came to mind, but I think about in our goal to be present, to live in the present and not be bound by the past. Forgiveness is a beautiful practice for that. You know,
yes.
what better way to stop being bound by the past, but to work through some forgiveness and free yourself to be in the present day or in your future
Yeah.
differently than in the past. Yeah.
So much and wiser. I think when we've gone through a forgiveness cycle, we become wiser and more compassionate in ways that we don't even know until we actually do it. And so that's kind of one of those side benefits that can't quite be a motivator until you've done the cycle once and you realize, wow, forgiveness is powerful and it makes me feel more empowered and makes me feel more expansive and you know uh, elevated, and you won't know that until you actually have that experience, and that
Yeah.
can be a motivation too.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute about self-forgiveness.
Yes,
This came up for me um almost a year ago now when
mm,
I had an event in my life that was tied to my children and my ex-husband and stirred up all kinds of things. And I just happened to land in a hot seat in a group coaching program. I said, I have issues.
I could talk about something.
I can talk about something if I must. And you know, the woman leading the group, she's a life coach as well. She specifically about my ex-husband, she said, "Laurel, have you forgiven him?" And of course I said, "I thought so. Our divorce was 26 years ago. I thought I had forgiven him." And then she said, "Have you forgiven yourself?" And that question came out of left field, and my only response was, "Oh, no, I guess not." And it was so interesting because I didn't realize, I have practiced forgiveness outwardly with other people so much more than I have practiced self-forgiveness. And that's a hard one. That might be a whole separate episode for us.
It could be.
Because when I think about all the reasons that we just talked about, the motivation for forgiveness, freeing yourself up, right? Not being bound to other people or
Yeah.
or cutting cords and ties to other
Releasing debt.
people, relationships, all of that.
Yeah.
We cannot cut the cord with ourselves.
Right, right. But we can release ourselves from that debt,
Yeah,
right? From the sense
yeah,
of obligation or that we owe something or that we have to carry some shame or whatever around it, right? Is
yeah,
we can release ourselves from that experience. And that's the oh, beautiful work of self forgiveness. Self forgiveness to me is the ultimate of forgiveness work because it allows us to truly grow our compassionate heart in ways that nothing else does. Because when we can un- humble ourselves, to our own imperfections and allow them and soften to, the situation and where you were at that point in your life and really like feel into like the choice that you made or the ways that you were behaving, right? And understand your limitations in that way, in that time, in that experience, and let yourself just be have been that, that and what did for me, it's always been the self-forgiveness always came so much more readily when I could say, what did I learn? How did I grow from that? And almost thank myself for having bared that burden in order to learn that thing and become more,
mhm,
more of a woman and more of a mother or
yeah.
more of a friend or whatever. Yeah, that's for me. Self forgiveness is just such powerful, beautiful work. Yeah,
It really is, and it's hard. It's not easy.
is it?
But I agree with you. It is the ultimate act of compassion. And often I think sometimes we can't really practice, forgiveness with other people
Yeah,
without practicing it, the self-forgiveness.
yeah,
Um,
I agree, Laura.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I love what is the lesson that you learned in that situation. And that has been something too, I think, that has helped me forgive other people. In I have a practice called It Happened For Me. We may have talked about this before, but
Mm,
it's a journal prompt. It happened for me.
yeah,
And it allows, in writing, all the lessons that came from something, all the good that came out of a situation that at the time I considered to be not good.
yeah,
Um, and so that is a good forgiveness practice of it happened for me. And
yeah,
what have you learned from it? What maybe you just learned, better boundaries. Maybe you are wiser because of a situation that has happened in the past.
yeah, yeah. And for things that, really are horrible that happen to people, I don't want anybody listening to think that we're taking any of those kinds of things lightly, or that, that it's an easy get to, that if something, how could, some things you wonder, how could you possibly ever think that happened for me, right? And for me, that is really, really deep, big spiritual work, right? To grow from really horrific things and to walk away with some lesson from them, to me is like the biggest spiritual possible growth or path that you're walking. So to me, when I see people that go through really horrific things and that can come forward and heal from them, like they came here to do really big spiritual work,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, I
Really big. Yeah.
yes, I agree with you
I
that
almost, I almost want to bow to anybody out there who's listening, like this big bow to you, like, that you came here and you're moving through those kinds of experiences. That's big stuff. Yeah.
and there are horrible, horrible things that happen.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, which I guess is why I would encourage our listeners to, if you are working through unforgivable
Mhm.
circumstances, to make sure you have support.
Yes.
That's how you process those situations or those events in your life.
Yeah.
Don't go it alone.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you repeated that, Laurel, because I think particularly in, getting into the deeper stuff that we just mentioned is you do want support and you do want help and have some guidance and to feel like you have someone there to help you navigate territory, because some of the emotional stuff is so big and really does often require that kind of witnessing, support, uh, not feeling alone, not feeling, because sometimes we get the big emotion that feels so scary. You want somebody there to know that you're going to be okay. You're going
Yeah,
to be okay. They can
yeah,
they can help you. So yeah, this is really important to be taken seriously, right? To go get some.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the other challenge in things that happen, whether they're small or huge, um, is our brain looks for answers. How? Why? Right? And so as we look for answers to explain and provide us a basis, from which we might be able to forgive, in those situations, if there is no explanation that you know we as a human can understand.
right,
There is no why.
right.
Um, those situations are really difficult
Yeah,
to process because we want to process the why. We
absolutely.
want to understand how things, why things are, how things are. And when there is no explanation, I think that's why, maybe it is truly spiritual path, um, and spiritual growth when you can move through something without the explanation or the understanding of why or
Yeah,
how.
yeah.
But maybe that's faith.
Yeah, I do think that faith comes into it in a big way, Laurel. I absolutely do, especially when you get into the later stages of, forgiveness work. There is a sense of your faith does carry you through, or your belief system, your spiritual belief system helps to put things in a context that you can relax into. And if you don't have that, it is hard to let go and find peace and make sense of it in a way, unless you have your own construct that feels like it fits
Yeah.
in that kind of experience. So let's go back to, I wanted to go back and touch on a couple things. One is, um, when we are trying to make sense of maybe some of the less horrific things that happen to people, right? Is one of the things that always helped me was to think, hurt people hurt other people. And so most of the time when there's forgiveness work and we're looking at somebody across the table that we want to forgive or need to forgive or might be ready to forgive, is knowing that their delivery of whatever hurt or violation came from their own hurt place, their own wounded place. And sometimes that helps to begin to start the softening, to start the understanding. So that's one thing that I wanted to come back to. And that ties into one of the other things I want to come back to, which was what forgiveness is not, right? So, and you kind of started there, which I think was really important and really important for us to revisit, is forgiveness is not about making it okay because the person came from a hurt place. It's not saying, okay, now it's okay that you did that because you were hurt. No, no, no. It's not about that, right? So forgiveness is not about saying something's okay. It's just saying that something did happen and there was a reason for it, and there's whatever the reason is, right? And there's or a horrific thing happened, and that's what happened. So I want to. So Laurel, any thoughts there? And then I want to go into just like a short little steps to work through for forgiveness. That will
No, let's
help
go.
you.
Let's go
Yeah.
right through the.
Yeah. Okay. So I have like five. This is probably my most simplified version of working through forgiveness. So the first part is acknowledging your feelings, right? Which we talked about a little bit at the beginning, is to really, talk about what are you feeling? Because forgiveness, when we've been violated, so many feelings come up, right? Primarily anger, hurt, sense of betrayal. Like there's kind of standard feelings that generally come up. But for us to begin to really, it helps us feel more emotionally intelligent, in control, even just to be able to say, I'm really angry about this. I'm really hurt. I'm really X, Y, Z, right? To really just acknowledge all of that. And to even write it is, I feel like journaling in this situation for forgiveness work can be very powerful, very, very powerful. So that's the first step. Second step is acknowledge the situation. And I always talk about doing this in a more like a factual kind of way. Like, let's say you were a court reporter and, you were just writing down, tell me what happened next. Tell me what happened next. Tell me, what happened next, what happened next, as if it was, there were no emotion at all. This happened and then this happened and this happened. So it's like facts and only the facts, because it also then allows you to just look at the actual process of what you experienced that needs to be forgiven and considered, right?
Yeah.
And when we're in the emotional throes of it all, right, sometimes we make the story bigger, or we can't remember it. Even sometimes we can't even remember really truly all of what happened. And so to be able to take the time and just put down what you actually remember and go through the actual situation, I think is really useful. And sometimes it can help diffuse some of the emotion too, on and off, as you just go, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, right?
Without adjectives is what I would say.
Yeah, that's
No
great.
adjectives.
No adjectives, no descriptors, just facts, verbs and nouns. Yeah, yeah. And then I always think about being able to like notice or get clear about the way the violation occurred. So, what in it was the actual violation, right? So, for some people, if you were to tell a story, they might think one part of the story was the violation, and somebody else might thought another part of the story was a violation, right? Oh, you walked away and you didn't even talk to me. Well, which part was it? The walking away? Was it the not talking to me? What was the thing that bothered you so much, or was it all of it, right? So, what is the violation? Because that also helps you identify, kind of like what are your values? What are the things you have expectations, how people are supposed to behave in certain ways, and kind of flush out some of that. So just being able to be clear about what the violation was. And then Here's the part that I feel like is really important, okay? Which is changing the boundaries that need to be changed so that you can honor what's important to you, right? Identify and honor what's important to you. And also to make sure that you don't have another violation, right? That you've changed the boundaries. Because I feel like a lot of times in forgiveness work, people get into loops where there's somebody does something that they don't like, and then they forgive them, and then it happens again, and they forgive them, and it happens, and then it's just compiling, and it just keeps going on, and there's no change in boundaries. And so there's really, setting a boundary is a really important part, because that's, again, we talked about taking your power back, feeling like you're empowered, and you took your power back, right? That's really how we take our power back, is changing the boundary,
Mm.
right? Yeah.
Mm.
And then the last part is the forgiveness work, softening your heart, letting go, detaching, not thinking about the experience all the time. I love in Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She talks about um, forgiveness in stages that you go through. And some of the stages she talks about is not reviewing it again and again, not talking about it over and over again, right? Taking some time away from it, actually. And so all of these things begin to help with us in terms of, I always think of forgiveness as a cycle, spiraling. You spiral around, you do it, and you do it again, and you do it a little bit more until you feel like there's really nothing left to let go of or forgive.
Yeah, those are great steps. And I was thinking about, you know, is it possible that some of the other inner work we've talked about, some of
Mm-hmm.
the other topics, are really, you know, kind of the foundation for forgiveness?
Yeah.
So acknowledging your feelings. If you're still working on that, how to identify your feelings, how to feel all of your feelings. Perhaps forgiveness is not yet available to you if you haven't been practicing how to feel all the feels.
Yeah.
And so just
Great.
thinking about that,
Good.
um, it, and that's okay, I guess, for our listeners.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, know that the
Yes.
work that you're doing, you know, it's all interrelated. And
Yeah.
so if you feel that you can't yet forgive, maybe that's not the place you start. Maybe you start in another place. You
Yeah.
start with your boundaries or your values. I think,
Yeah.
when you talked, Laurel, about noticing what is the actual violation. I've
Mm.
been thinking a lot about this in triggers, right? And working with clients, and something, a word or an interchange with another person or an event triggers something in them. And I love when we get triggered, because it is the deepest, most honest clue of our values.
Yeah.
And when we stop and think about a trigger as identifying a value, you know, that is deep work. Like, what
Yes.
what is the value that you hold that has been violated? And it almost, for me, makes me, I don't want to say it justifies, but it confirms that when I feel violated, that that is a legitimate feeling because of my personal individual values, which I get to choose. I get to choose my values. No one else does. And so I think it's really empowering to work through some of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. I'm so glad you went there with all of that, Laurel, because I think that's so important to, for our listeners to know, right? Wherever you are in your forgiveness journey is simply wherever you are in your forgiveness journey, and whether you have to stay in one of those steps for a really long time, or you feel like you can't get to one of those steps, as long as you're looking at it and considering it and allowing it, and if you have the motivation to get through forgiveness work, it will come over time, right? um, and And even just coming back to what those motivations are, right? If you're struggling with wanting to do forgiveness, coming back to what we talked about at the beginning about it's really for you, to free you, right? So that
Yeah.
you can have inner peace, so that you can feel detached from the person and the story and no longer a victim of it all. Like that's really beautiful work to have and to make that shift.
It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. It reminds me of my year of the word, or my word of the year this year was
Mm,
more than one word, of course, but it was lightness of being. That was my quest.
yeah.
And what I've realized, through the year and thinking about what makes me feel heavy and what ties me down or holds me back or bounds me to something in the past, those are the things that get in my way when I'm trying really hard to live a little bit more lightness.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to know, in forgiveness, it's just one more tool to free yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Forgiveness, putting forgiveness process in your toolbox, right?
Yeah.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So, Laurel, what shall we leave our listeners with today in our big talk today about forgiveness? What might be some journaling or some suggestions around approaching forgiveness? And I know everybody's in a different place, so what we suggest may or may not be what you're ready for or what you want, but take it or leave it. It's all good.
I would think that, because this was on my mind, often we think about forgiveness as someone else that we need to forgive.
Mhm.
At least I do. And the contemplation and the thinking and working through who in my life might want to ask me, or who in my life should I be asking for forgiveness, right?
Mm,
Are there things, are there people, are there circumstances that perhaps I may have caused someone else to still be attached to, some past interaction or past um, violation that I did unknowingly, maybe?
yeah,
Um, are those out there?
yeah, yeah,
Or knowingly,
yeah,
do do I know
yeah.
circumstances or situations and people that perhaps um, I should offer,
Forgiveness
you
too,
know, forgive?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it could be on the path of your own self forgiveness. You might have your own self forgiveness work. So that's beautiful, Laurel. Yeah. Yeah. I would say for me, I would offer up the idea of simply taking an inventory. Start like simple and start with the sense of what might you have if you made a little list of you have forgiveness work to do and you're carrying and it feels heavy when you think about it. What is the list? Just to allow yourself to look at what you might be carrying that you could lighten up and let go of, that might free you, right? And that might be some motivation right there. Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
nothing
good.
like feeling light and free. mm, I love those two of my high quality uh, feelings to feel. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm
Yeah.
with you.
Oh, so Laurel, thank you so much for your wisdom today. I feel like, some of the things that, especially you brought out here today, were so important in our conversation. And I know for our listeners, if you struggling with forgiveness, come back and listen a few times because there's some real things in here that I think could be helpful. But you might want to come back and listen to them a couple times, take them in slowly, and allow it to be again that circular work where you come and you revisit it and you let go and you come back and visit it again. And hopefully, you'll use our podcast as many times as you need to help you walk through forgiveness because it's a beautiful journey when you get to
Yeah.
the other side. It's really worth it.
It is so worth it. And I was thinking that, as you work through those 5 steps of forgiveness, if there is an area that y you need, to our listeners, that you need additional conversation about, that we haven't covered at all, or we haven't covered deeply enough, let us know.
Yeah.
What What can we help with? How can we help you as you work through all this beautiful work?
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Laurel, because we are here to help. That's really what we want to do. So send in your questions, send in your comments. We're here for you, and we'll be back for more beautiful work, beautiful life really soon. Thanks, Laurel.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye for now,
Bye.
everybody.